Good. Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. I mean, I'm not sure if everyone is here, but we will jump in. We're aware of time. And yeah, we'll use the timer too. And I mean, we may take more than a minute, but we're aware there are lots of questions. So yeah, we'll dive in and we're gonna sort of, some of them we'll all answer and some of them only one of us will answer. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. So yeah, let's dive in. The first one was something along the lines of kind of sharing our personal reflections as guides of why this particular work matters and what our kind of hopes are in terms of our own learning and expansion. Do either of you want to jump in on that one? We'll all take a minute or so to answer it, but
Yep, I'm going to jump in.
excellent. Will you
Uh,
time yourself?
I am. My main question, my core question right now is how is this crisis part of the um, collective initiation of the human species? So I'm listening in and tending that edge that we as a cohort, that we as a collective, the guides included, moving through the 18 months together might be tending this, holding this question, how we ourselves, the groups, communities, families, ways of relational field that we're in might be serving the edge of initiation that these times, I believe, are offering us. Over to one of you.
Boom, look at that. 45 seconds. That was impressive. Madeline, would you like to go or do you want me to go?
I can go.
Great.
I don't think I'll be able to do it in a minute, but we'll see. So why this work matters to me. So I'm going to be in particular involved in the first module, so the Becoming Trauma Attuned module. Some of you have worked with me before. Hi guys. Um, and so you'll know that my focus is on understanding trauma in a very kind of personal and embodied way, not for the sake of staying with trauma, but for the sake of understanding our beautiful human nature and what trauma can distort in that human nature, and what we learn about ourselves and our culture when we start to understand trauma and understand how to integrate within our own beings differently. And then what that means in terms of the cultures that we create from that place. So, what brings me to that work is my own life history. I came into the world, my early years had lots of trauma, capital T trauma, to the extent that I pretty much couldn't function in the world. And my experience of my own consciousness was quite diffuse. And my sense of being an empowered being was quite diffuse. And it wasn't until I had the blessing of loads of trauma therapy and I studied trauma and got to do a lot of my own healing that I realized what being human can actually feel like. And that was a revelation for me. It was also something that helped me to understand myself as a white-bodied person in Canada, where I'm from. I really needed to, I felt from a very early age like I had to understand the inequalities that exist in Canada. So, in particular, the history of colonization there, the state of yeah, what Indigenous people in Canada have experienced. For me to understand my own identity as a Canadian, um, I discovered that the most useful route for me into that was through the lens of the body and the nervous system. And that took me into a very deep exploration of dominance, and the roots of dominance in our own embodied dynamics, as well as the echoes of ancestral trauma and colonization. Um, so the reason this work matters to me is um, because I've experienced the terrible pain and suffering of living with unresolved trauma, unprocessed trauma. Um, I've also had the privilege of experiencing a healing journey. Um, and I'm still human. I'm still on this planet. I still, suffer and have to relate with dynamics of trauma in myself and other beings all the time. But by learning about it, I've seen, I feel like I have a window into what we're capable of. And I've heard lots of you guys share that part of what has drawn you to this program is a sense of knowing what you're, or maybe sensing what you're actually capable of as a human being, or sensing what we humans are actually capable of, and wanting to find ways of bringing more of the beauty of that through into our human cultures, particularly at this moment of crisis when there might actually be more opportunities for that kind of radical change to happen. So that's what calls me to it. And maybe I'll stop there because I've already spoken for far more than my minute.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madeleine. So I guess what I will share is, for me, there's something about the particularity of weaving together the threads that this journey is weaving together, which is, we can look at it through different lenses, but it's like, to bring together what we might call social justice work, decolonizing at depth work with soul work, feels really unusual, and I certainly in my own journey over the last few decades have kind of longed for spaces, whichever of those of the kind of inner work or activist spaces I'm in, I always would find myself longing for these other threads to be woven in. And so for me, the reason why it feels so important is that I just feel like, how could we possibly be doing the soul work that is making ourselves available for true power, for life force in service of all beings of Earth? How can we be doing that without an analysis around decolonizing and, the role that modernity and all of the flavors of modernity have played in shaping us and creating the ways that we show up in the world? And so for me, yeah, that's why it really matters to me, is because it feels like in these times, yeah, it's this kind of expanding our own consciousness so that we can actually show up in the ways that the world is longing for through us, of course necessitates that we do that work ourselves. But if it's only focused on ourselves, then we're of course missing a trick, because it's not just ourselves. We're not individuals. We are a collective entity, being, system, web. And so in terms of the, what the question included, the what's, what learnings are we longing for through this? I kind of feel like it is that journey. It's like I'm wanting to be in this experiment of how is it when we, dedicate 18 months to kind of grappling with this. And because there's a reality that often when we go into the realms of tending to threads like decolonizing and queering our consciousness and all of these kind of what can appear like quite middle world kind of threads that are causing a lot of suffering, often we can kind of find ourselves propelled into this very same power over drama triangle consciousness that is kind of creating that challenge in the first place. So it's like, how do we center these very real kind of aspects of modernity that are causing so much suffering without then getting co-opted into that very same power over drama triangle consciousness within the journey itself, and no doubt that will happen. And the question around mainstreams and margins and how we might be in that dance together, that kind of speaks to that, I think, as well. We'll come on to that later, but yeah, I mean, I feel like what this program kind of brings together is, for me, my life's work. I think it's probably true for all three of us in different ways, but it's my life's work. It feels like, this inquiry around the role of power within everything that we do and within being of service, yeah, is the reflection and how we might go about it in this particular container, and centering, this inquiry that's, as things fall apart, there's a boldness in calling it that, but it's in, there's an intentionality in that feels like it's part of the grappling. How do we find the transformation and joy whilst recognizing things are falling apart and parts of our culture are necessarily dying? Yeah.
I want to add something because I only talked for 45 seconds, which is to say, that one of the things, the reasons that we named it that, and following on from what I said before, is we hope deeply that the cohort will be exactly the thing that you all spoke in terms of your longing for community and support and tending the ache of the loneliness. And there'll be a kind of a coherence possible in each of your systems, your nervous systems, your energy bodies, your hearts. And we're not going to rush to put it back together again. We're not going to rush to make things better. In fact, a big part of what we're up to in the larger arc is to let the things that need to fall apart and die. This is the part about collective initiation. Let the things fall apart, some of you named, that need to die, die. And to do that within the cohort structure so that the field, the group field, can support each of you to move towards your growing edge and slough off whatever skins or let go of whatever ways that modernity has its hooks in each of our psyches and our bodies and our hearts and our minds. We're going to be navigating into unknown territory. The idea is that when things fall apart, we can actually step into the unknown. And we don't know what's going to happen. In the deepest level, we have an idea, we have a plan, we have an arc, we have a kind of structures for an experience as guides, each of us, lots of experiences as guides, holding people through processes and 5-day programs and vision quests. But what each of you in your soul threads and in your journey and following your desire, and the way Earth is desiring to shape you for these times and in these times, as this initiatory journey of humans at this time, we don't know what's going to happen. And having the resources and the community, the inner resources and the outer resources, it's part of why we're starting with trauma attunement and support, is to have the resources to step into the unknown together, which is ultimately what these times are calling for. We're trying to know what's happening. We're in predicting control, which is the power over culture.
I'd also like to speak to the piece that you've both spoken to a little bit about what good looks like. Because, well, I just want to echo that we are all bringing our, imperfect, wounded, modernity influenced selves to this group, right? None of us has the answer or has, embodied perfection, whatever that is. So what good would look like for me is creating a container together that is really grounded, that is kind, that has humility, that none of us is expecting perfection, and where we can actually just take a little bit more time, maybe to tend to our process of connecting with each other, even while we're going through the journey of the course. So there's going to be, lots of different layers to the experience, right? So you'll all be developing whatever you're wanting to develop in yourselves. You're going to be, thinking about your own inner growth and how that's connected to the work you're doing in the world. But then also alongside both of those things, can we create a group container where we can just take a little bit more time to notice and acknowledge perhaps some of the things that are happening between us? We won't be able to notice and acknowledge all of them, right? Because we're going to be interacting on so many levels. But can we just give a little bit more time and awareness and love and attention? Yeah, so that we can have opportunities perhaps to learn things about ourselves. I've heard a few of you talk about blind spots, and you're wanting to join the group in order to have some opportunities to encounter those blind spots in yourself. So can we make space for that? And can we take the time and make the effort and be generous with each other about what we're experiencing from one another, and be ready to learn and grow. And I certainly hold that for myself as a facilitator. That's always my intention in a group, is to be, as vulnerable and wholly a participant as I can be in the group's process, because I'm obviously part of it too.
Thank you, both of you. So I'm aware that we have a lot of questions and they keep coming, and we're not going to get through them all in this time. So just again to say we will answer some of them in the frequently asked questions section, and maybe we'll do a recording as well of us answering some of the ones we don't have time to. I'm just going to quickly kind of say that with the questions that have been the kind of more practical questions around group size and dates and things like that, I will put that into the frequently asked questions sheet, because I think that will be a better use of our time. And yeah, what else? Oh, yeah, so there was a question around the structure of immersions. So I'm just going to say that to that, it's very emergent, and each of those will be designed kind of, there's quite a long time, as some of you have pointed out, between now and April. So we haven't got clarity around what structure that's going to take yet. But yeah, so that's kind of still in the mystery around that. What else? The approaches and methodologies question and te other teachers that might be joining. So in the invitation itself, there was a page that described the different approaches and methodologies. So I signpost you there. And we have no idea who the other teachers will be, because it will depend on who the participants end up being. So yeah, I'm picking off the quicker ones for now. So I'm going to just speak to the pay what you can afford and money kind of thread. And then I think the other main thread that I'm seeing in the questions is this one around how we'll tend to and be in the dance around margins and mainstreams, and tending to kind of practical aspects of that as well. And so that will be where we'll go after this one. But I'm going to speak for now to the question around pay what you can afford. So I'm going to just speak generally to that thread first of all, and then I'll look at the particular question. So there have actually been a number of people that have said to me, who aren't on this call now, who are interested in applying. They've brought this question of like, oh, I'd really love to apply, but I'm not sure if I can actually really afford it, which, is obviously, and that, they were bringing an awareness that it is pay what you can afford. And yet there can be these barriers within us that even though that invitation is there, can we genuinely lean into that? And can we, if we don't have much or any resource, can we accept the generosity of that? And if we do have resource, can we still choose to give it, even though we know that the option there is to not? And so, yeah, just speaking to that, it feels like a really important part of the inquiry as a group to be exploring our relationships with money, because this is an aspect of modernity that often doesn't get tended to. And so, yeah, just really wanting to say that we're going to be tending that thread in the most kind of fiercely compassionate way that we can, so that we really, recognize that all of us have a lot of wounding and complexity around our relationships with money, and we're all going to be coming in from very different places, and depending on, the environment we grew up in and how abundant or not that environment was, it's going to massively shape our relationships with money. So yeah, just wanting to really speak to that and say that it's a thread that I think, all of us in the guide team are kind of looking forward to being worked on ourselves through that. Feels like a strong thread to kind of be exploring together, but we'll be doing that in really safe and compassionate ways. Yeah. And then the particular question, I'm not sure I fully understood, something around, let me see if I can find it. If someone finds it before me, then let me know.
I'd love to hear more about the process around pay what you can afford, how supported by funding as well as our contributions Starter Culture will be.
Right. So the funding that we've received is enough to cover the cost of delivering the program. But the kind of agreement that we have with within ourselves and the funder, and just with Mystery, is that we want it to be in the spirit of pay it forward. So we certainly would feel kind of gutted if this ended up being a kind of standalone, this was the only kind of 18-month program that was able to happen because we don't have any resources going forward to then sort of subsidize places for another future iteration of this. So our hope is that, the intention is that whatever is generated through participants on this program will then be put straight into a pot to then enable people to then, for a future version of this, to have subsidized places. So it's unlikely that there are going to be future iterations that will be this generously funded, because this is kind of quite a miracle gift that we're still pinching ourselves about. But we certainly really, really pray that we'll be able to kind of subsidize it again going forward, because it's really palpable how many more people are coming forward as a result of it being pay what you can afford. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. So yeah, moving on to the questions that came in around kind of mainstreams and margins and privilege, and just the kind of practical realities of living lives that carry marginalization. I think it's probably, with the time we've got, it's good to sort of for the three of us to kind of just speak to that more generally. So I just want to invite either of you, Sarah or Madeleine, if you want to feel ready to start that, then I'm inviting you in. If not, I'm happy to start. Yeah. Sarah, is that me? Okay. Um, so in so there are a few ways of kind of moving into this terrain, and I think one of them is just to say that so much of what this journey is about each of us being supported to create the conditions within ourselves and within the cultural container and our lives beyond that, to be able to compost the aspects of ourselves and the aspects of others that we marginalize. And so that's very much the level at which we're kind of focusing this inquiry, is at the level of kind of consciousness and in our collective culture. And so it's very much in this kind of self-inquiry around that, of like how is that happening in me? What is it about myself that I'm marginalizing? And perhaps even, that's completely in shadow, that I'm not even aware of, that I'm projecting onto others. I'm making others wrong for, or I'm making others big for, and therefore marginalizing. And how can we create those conditions that allow these parts of ourselves to be reclaimed, and the power of them to be reclaimed, so that we can each be showing up in our wholeness? So that's really the center of our inquiry when it comes to issues around that which is marginalized. And then, of course, there's the very real lived reality of what it is to be one that carries particular flavors and fragrances of identity and ways of being in the world that are marginalized, and then the harm that we can experience as a result of that, and the suffering it can cause. And in a way, it's where these two meet that this inquiry is really about. And it's edgy territory, it's really edgy territory. And I spoke earlier about this kind of, how do we kind of have compassion for the reality that, so often when we are within this territory of inquiring mainstreams and margins, that the whole drama triangle then gets replayed out again, and so how can we create the compassionate and brave and courageous and tender containers that allow us to be in these inquiries, that mean that we can be brave enough to name when we're being impacted by perhaps a mainstream culture that is not aware of how it's impacting us, as perhaps one that is carrying a marginalized identity of way of being in the world. And how can we, as that one, perhaps, how can we bring that in a way that increases the chances of it being received in a way that can be heard and responded to, and our deep needs met? And how perhaps in areas of our lives where we carry more power and we're part of the mainstream, how can we actually be doing that work so that we become more and more attuned to where we're blind? Because it tends to be really comfortable when we're in the mainstream. It tends to be when we're in the mainstream, we're completely unaware that we're in the mainstream, right? It's like it's just the kind of paradox of the mainstreams and margins. Um, so there's so much more we could say about this, and it really does feel like this kind of where these two realities meet, the kind of this composting at depth around what's marginalized within us and what we marginalize in others and within our groups, where that deep work meets the kind of the surface reality of being a group, working together, walking together, dancing together. And again, in this dance of this isn't designed as a group process per se, and yet we're going to be a group and group process stuff will come up. And so the invitation is for us all to be in this constant dance around radical self-responsibility meets regenerative feedback, and really refining our capacities around that as part of the composting work, part of like how do we get good at navigating this territory in ways that expand our consciousness and the groups we're in at the same time as really taking care of each other. So that's what I have to say about that thread. And then actually, just one last thing I want to say is about the very practical realities. I mean, there was a question around, what about tending to things like chronic illness, as an example, and that showing up, in participants and how we tend to that. And I mean, I think it's a bigger question than we can answer here because it is so particular to, each of us showing up, what we're bringing. And that will be a conversation for those invited into the container as participants. That will be an inquiry that we'll tend to right at the outset. And so we'll be having conversations with those that are invited to be part of the container. And then we'll be able to explore that. I mean, yeah, so that we can be realistic of what is possible for this container to hold and what's not. And that feels like a really important thing for us to be realistic about as well. We don't want to make promises we can't uphold. So yeah, that's what I have to say. I'm very aware of time. So handing over to one or other of you two.
We only actually have 3 minutes left, so unless there's something burning, Madeline, I think we should actually complete and do our closing because it's 27. Just wanting to honor people's time. And I mean, there's many things about everything I could say and would want to say, and hopefully, we'll get to say during the fellowship. But
and what we'll do is we'll make sure that we definitely respond to any questions that we didn't have time to answer in the frequently asked questions sheet. And it may be that we also decide to record us speaking to some of the questions that we ran out of time to answer. So, yeah, sorry for those of you that came with questions that they didn't get answered. Yeah.
And thank you for bringing them. I feel in your questions, I feel your wisdom and your intelligence and your gifts and your capacities and your experience and skill that you're bringing with you and would bring into the container. So just the way that you ask the questions you're asking and the kinds of questions you're asking are a very powerful manifestation of you, where you are in your journey and the kind of creature that you are. So thank you for that integrity and that capacity. Okay, here we are at the threshold. Just taking a few deep breaths together, if you would. We've been in this kind of talking space and just dropping back down into the softness of the body in whatever your capacity for that is right now. You might notice what you're taking with you, what remains in the mystery, any responses parts of you might have to things that we've said. Please know that you are welcome to reach out to us, of course, also over email, if there's things that follow on from this call. Yeah. And as we're here at this threshold, I'm wanting to, for all of us, give thanks for the earth and water the fire and the air, and pray that it would be that these ones, these ancient, most ancient ancestors of ours, will continue to thrive, and give gratitude for them nourishing our lives every day, of every moment of every day. I give gratitude for your wise and well ancestors, my wise and well ancestors that have guided and brought us here to this moment. I give gratitude for all of the ways that we've moved through each of our lives that brought us into the knowing and being and embodying that each of us find ourselves in and as today on this beautiful earth, and that we might have had the miracle of the gift of coming together for these 90 minutes. I know that I have been changed and transformed by your words, your presence, your hearts, and by opening to these ones who have held us. Gratitude to all unseen ones, wise and well ones, guides and allies who've been with us during this hour and a half, that are holding all of our prayers and all of our longing out and bringing it out into the web of life. Everything we've said here, especially the things that we've shared from the heart, have been food for the web, and have already been tending and doing exactly what we're up to with the fellowship, doing the consciousness transformation, doing the healing work, welcoming in all the parts, and offering our blessing and our prayer and our gratitude to life in honor of the life-death-life cycle that composting to relational culture invites us into. Okay, blessings on your way. I hope that we'll see lots of you again. I hope we'll receive lots of your applications for the fellowship. We'll be sending out the recording, we'll be sending out the fact sheet with more responses to your questions, and are open for anything you might want to reach out to us about.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really rich and very touching to receive you all and feel your interest. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Hopefully see you again.
Very much.
You're welcome to all unmute if you wish, and you would make a joyful goodbye.
Farewell, everybody.
Bye.
Lots of love.
Thank you.